better? Let me know if that's better. Thank you. That might have been the it might have just been that I was on the UE room. Sometimes I forget, you know, when we're connected to our speakers and things. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, girl. Saved my life. Well, welcome. Lovely to have you here today. Beautiful. Much better. Yeah, sometimes I forget. It's so interesting. UE rooms are like so fucking fantastic, but the same thing happens when I'm with my one-on-one clients in Telegram, and I do voice notes, and I get to the end and I'm like, oh, I have to redo it. So thank you. Yeah, so let's make sure that I've shared this, and then we're going to talk a little bit into addiction. And I suppose many of us, or most of us, when we say the word addiction, we associate it with like alcohol or drugs of some sort, but there is so many different things we can be addicted to. Addiction is not just substance addiction. So that is shared properly. Let's just make sure that I have this open on my computer because it's easier for me to read comments as we go. So it's been coming up a lot around. I had a couple of people I was talking to and having conversations with in the last couple of months around addiction, people battling with different addictions and things. So I suppose I wanted to come on today to just share my view and my understanding and belief around where our addictions come from, and that the addiction is not actually the issue. We often look at, we're like, oh, that person is, Dylan says, food, sex, technology, escaping uncomfortable feelings. Yeah, fuck, yes. Yeah, but fancy you to see this, Dylan, and come on. No, I'm like, I'm a bit nervous because I feel like your words of wisdom around addiction is fucking incredible. But I've had it come up a lot lately. I had a memory come up. I made a post yesterday as a memory came up in my photos and stuff. I think it was on Facebook, and it was a photo of me when I was 18, and I was like, who the fuck is that? A photo of me like nearly 11 years ago, and I remember that version of myself so clearly, and all I did was sink, piss, you know, like do that. I don't know if it's a cliche New Zealander thing, or New Zealand culture, or all over the world, or where, but it's like that cliche, like, yeah, let's get a box and sink some piss, like same old thing that like we kind of grow up with in our teenhood and things like that. But that's kind of what I learned, and it wasn't from a specific person or people. It was just like everywhere I looked when I was younger, it was just like it was normal. It was normal, and I feel like it is in a lot of situations. Not everyone experiences it, but quite normal to like get drinks on the weekend and like sink all the alcohol and get really legless and stuff like that. And so I wrote a little post around that because I realized in my own self-development journey, like I probably drink like a handful times a year. Now I shared that in that post, like probably maybe 4 or 5 times a year, and that's about it. But I kind of consider myself to be someone sober because I don't generally drink. I don't generally feel like drinking, if that makes sense. But in the last couple of weeks, I've drunken a couple of times with good intention, and it's been really, really nice. But I've known my boundaries in a different way. And I suppose in my past, I never considered myself to like be an addict or with the label, or say that I was an alcoholic or I had a drug addiction problem or anything like that. But then we can get real deep into what do you classify as addiction. Like we all have a different perception and understanding and whatever it means to us. And something I did hear someone say the other day is that if you're drinking to or diving into addiction, so now I've kind of contradicted myself a little bit because now I'm talking into drinking and drugs, aren't I? But that's what comes up firstly for us, but there's addiction everywhere. So I've just also I've shared quite a bit about it, a book called Facing Love Addiction, and it's about love avoidance and love addiction. And I definitely have had an addiction, like a love addiction trait within me and my emotional relationships, whether it's friends, family, or romantic. So we can be addicted to all sorts of things. Our phones are fucking addictive, and what did you say? Okay, Dylan. Dylan says, thanks for giving your time to bring awareness, Maddie. Much love. I appreciate you. Oh, thank you, Dylan. You've taught me a lot on your journey around sharing and speaking into it. I suppose I had a little bit of fear about coming on to speak about it because the stigma of being an expert in a certain area, and I'm like, well, I don't know addiction in and out, but what I do feel in my heart is what I'm seeing in a lot of the healing and supporting my clients and people in my life and things, that addiction is a really, really, really common thing that's coming towards me or coming into my space to work with people with and have conversations with, and clients and friends and people. Like, it's so common out there, and I wanted to talk about it today because what I am learning so deeply, and it kind of seems obvious, that like the addiction on top is not the actual issue. It's what's underneath the addiction that is the core of it that we want to address and look at, if that makes sense. Like, because if we look into the core healing, and I wanted to talk about, so the Soul Healing Starter Package that I've just released, it's a 7-session like spiritual intuitive healing package, which is fucking incredible. We're going to inner child healing, shadow work, wound healing process, feeling, grieving, self-care and stuff like that. So why the addiction conversation come up for me was like, okay, so often like we look at addiction, oh, like that's bad, or we look at it negative, like that's bad that you have an addiction of any sort, whether it's sex, whether it's dating lots of different people, whether it's playing on your phone and not being able to put your phone down, whether it's addiction to food, alcohol, whatever your addiction is, because addiction is everywhere, whether it's needing validation from other people. You could even have, like, I suppose, mixed things, like sometimes we put others down because it makes ourselves feel better and things like this, so it can really intertwine and it can be so complex. But I suppose I wanted to come and speak into it in a sense that it's not the addiction that is the issue, it's what's underneath the addiction, because the reason that we are stepping into an addiction, in my point of view and my understanding and my experiences, is we step into an addiction because our needs aren't met elsewhere, that there's holes or wounds or gaps or emotions that are unfelt or unprocessed or unhealed, or there's underlying trauma, and then you might be going, well, duh, Maddie. Duh. But this is something that it's so simple, and then like when we speak about it, it's so obvious, but at the same time, a lot of the time we just look around and we're like, oh, well, why doesn't that person just stop drinking? Or why doesn't that person just stop smoking? Why doesn't that person just they're going round in cycles in a toxic relationship and they keep going back to the same hurt and pain? Why don't they just leave it? And it's not that easy, because we haven't dealt with the underlayers and the underneath of the addiction that is coming out on top. And that's why that's why this came through, and this is part of the reason I have created this Soul Healing Starter Package, is to dive underneath the addictions and the traits and the characteristics and things and choices and behaviors that are coming out in our life out here. We can dig deeper into the layers underneath, into a child of like, why are we drinking? Oh, because do we feel worthless? Do we feel worthless? Do we feel abandoned? Do we feel hurt? Do we feel not good enough? Do we feel neglected? Do we feel unlovable? Like, where has this stemmed from in whatever addiction is coming out in us? And I really think about phones. Like, phones is a real strong one that's coming up at the moment. I'm like, how we just scroll and we don't even know why we're scrolling. You know, there is other elements of it that they design apps and stuff to keep us looking and get addicted. But at the same time, why are we scrolling? Why are we scrolling saying we're bored? Like, that's a real classic one as well, is we're saying, oh, well, I'm really bored, I've got nothing to do. I get triggered when I hear people say stuff like that, when they say, oh, I'm bored, I've got nothing to do. And I'm like, well, there's so much to do, but you're there's a hole somewhere, there's a gap somewhere, there's a wound somewhere, there's a barrier or a protection that you were trying to protect yourself. Excuse me. in a sense, because you're saying you're bored, but there's so many different options. So it's really like being bored isn't really a reason. I'm like, are you just interested? Are you just interested in that certain thing, or you're more focused on this, etc., etc., etc.? So I think about back to, I wanted to share just a little bit about that situation that I posted about yesterday, because I realized, I was like, I have had a form of addiction, and we all have forms of addiction right now, and how can we look deeper into the core? How can we unpack why we are finding it satisfactory, or the climb of like going back to that addiction over and over and over and over again? Why do we keep climbing back there? Ask ourselves, why do we keep climbing back there? Do we have fear? Are we scared? Because I think fear is a really big one, like having fear in like that situation, that photo that came up for me. So I was like, holy shit, who is that person? It seems like a whole nother life. That photo of me from 11 years ago, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, all I knew to do was like to do what I was told. I was told to go to school, get a career. I wasn't physically told. Someone didn't tell me you have to do this, but that was the thing we did. We went to school, we found something that we wanted to do as a job, then we went and worked the job, and then we worked really hard, and then we were fucking exhausted, and then our worthiness would come out or be portrayed by what degree we got, what career we got, etc., etc. So that would decide our worth, and how much money we make would be our worth, etc., etc., etc. This is like what I am hearing from that old version of myself, and that I would just, okay, well, this is what I'm meant to do, and then I'll meet someone and I'll love them and I'll have babies and I'll get married, and that's what I'm meant to do. And I followed. It's interesting because I feel, so for my journey, I look back to when I did used to drink when I was younger. I just followed because what was around me was, like my mum and dad, for example, my dad doesn't really drink, never really has. My mum likes a wine here and there and social drinking. So nothing significant like from my family system, but I suppose like the teenhood and the environment of like my friends and the social societal environment, it was very, very normal to just look around me and to just, oh, this is what we do. Like some of it is exploration as well, I suppose, when we're younger and we're exploring and we're like, oh, what's this thing called alcohol, and what's this thing called sex, etc., etc., and exploring and adventuring and finding out and things like that. But I look back and I'm like, oh, so I just got into this role, like I just took it on from little bits surrounding me, maybe from movies and little bits and pieces, that, oh yeah, like this is what we do. I didn't really think it was good or bad. I was just like, this is what we do. We get alcohol and we sink the piss. Like, that's what I'm thinking. I'm going, what? Like, where did I take that on? And so I kind of embodied like that culture growing up. And then a few years ago, I didn't even notice. I didn't even really notice at the time that I knew that I drank a lot. I knew that I partied a lot. I knew that I had party drugs, but I didn't understand the extent of why I was doing it, or the deeper understanding or observation of like what was actually happening, if that makes sense. I just did it. I just did it without any conscious thinking or engagement into really like why I was doing it, just because, oh, other people did it and the people around me would drink and party, so okay, I'll do it too. So I didn't have any questioning. I didn't have any of my own thinking mind, if that makes sense. And then now, through having these conversations recently around addiction and things, I had a girl come to me a few weeks ago, wanting some support around getting out of, it's actually multiple different situations, but wanting some support and wanting my guidance on, supporting her. She obviously and clearly knew and expressed to me that she knew that there was underlying emotional stuff that was really painful and hurting for her and traumatic. but she was like, I don't know how to get rid of this addiction. And someone fantastic like Dylan would be fantastic to talk to if you are facing these kinds of challenges too. Dylan has an incredible journey, and Dylan has come to share on our podcast at Ride Your Stigma before, so if you want the link to that, feel free to send me a private message or pop it in the comments, and I'll definitely send you Dylan's episode on the Ride Your Stigma podcast. It's incredible to listen to. But something I realized in talking to my mentor when I had this beautiful lady approach me and want some support around addiction, I was like, well, I've witnessed my own version of addiction, but it's not everyone's versions of addiction. I feel are really different, even though they're all the same. I want to say, like, they're all the fucking same, because the core is we've got this wound, we've got this gaping wound or hole or hurt or pain, or a feeling of not enoughness, not feeling lovable or being able to love someone else, not loving ourselves, feeling that sense of loneliness, neglect, not being good enoughness inside, and not being able to, I suppose, in some way or form, unpack our emotions, understand them, express them, feel them, breaking free of shame in a certain way. That is all where our addiction starts, is like all these internal feelings of we want to escape them, we want to it might not even be intentionally or consciously, but in some way or form, on some level, when we are diving into an addiction, we are either trying to take control of something. Like, I think of like eating disorder again, like I haven't witnessed or experienced eating disorder in my own experiences. But it's, for me, I can imagine, or in my opinion, that things like eating disorder, depending on what they are, because there's so many different types of eating disorder and things like that, but eating disorders, I think, like, if everything else in my life was out of control, my emotions, my decisions, my family space, my relationships, if I was out of control or going through abuse or any other things like this, but I could control my eating, well, yeah, I would go that way too. I could understand where that comes from. So that's the type of like addiction, whether it's like overeating or undereating or whatever the eating disorder is, but that's the same, similar intertwinedness as well as something like eating disorder, in a sense, is like an addiction to control something, have some sort of controls, which is stability, which is like trying to create safety within our life, within ourselves and our internal. And it's deep, man. It's deep. Like, there's so many layers of different addiction. I think about the sense of my control in like my past relationships and things like that, when I go to like verbally attack my partner or something in the past. Like, I've definitely done that because it's a sense of loss of control. So it's like my love addiction side of somewhere deeper inside, unpacked in the inner child, in the shadows, in the wounds, which we do in my soul healing starter package and unpack. That's what I support you through. It's like somewhere in there I felt unloved. I didn't love myself, and I didn't feel lovable somewhere internally in my emotions, under the layers, under the surface of the addiction of love addiction and control, and like, why don't you love me more, la 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 la, message me back, why aren't you prioritizing me, all of my this is what I feel like, is how I would behave and talk in my addiction. And this is, again, no shame on anyone that is experiencing this. I'm sharing my own experiences because I'm here to normalize it, that it's okay, it's natural, like that there's underneath the surface. It's like in this example of like love addiction with me, under the layers, in my inner child, in my shadows, in my wounds, in all the layers of my feelings and emotions, somewhere in there I deeply believed and had a core pain and hurt that I did not love myself and I was not lovable and no one loved me, because then it came out in an addictive form of me addictive texting my partners, or because I wanted a sense of control. I didn't consciously say, oh, I'm going to attack this person through message and make them love me or like me, and maybe if I do this thing they might like me, and if I look hot like this, or if I do this and be really nice and look after them, they will love me more. I didn't set out and say that, but when you really start to break it down and do this deeper healing, you start to see wider, and you start to see and understand and observe yourself that you're like, oh, okay, all right, it was because I didn't feel loved. It's because I was scrambling and searching to be loved in some way or form. So then we unpack it in something like my Soul Healing Starter Package, where we look into your inner child and where in the years of your life growing up did you not feel loved, and where are the wounds, how can we heal them, and then we step through unpacking them and then letting your inner child or your shadows be seen, heard and felt, so that they can feel through, so that we can actually heal the core of it. And then when we heal the core of unpacking those emotions and feelings and trauma and wounds from our past and our shadows and our inner childhood, our even past lives, when we start to unpack that and really start to understand it, then we start to heal it and actually come through and then get a sense of peace that we're like, oh, okay, I wasn't just being a drama queen, I wasn't just being a bully, I wasn't just being a victim, it was valid. This is why my child, my inner self, my inner child felt that way. Now I'm allowing her or him or they to have the space to feel felt, to feel heard, to speak, to say what is coming up for them. And then the addiction just falls away itself, because suddenly when we've really core healed right in the core of our center, of in our energy and our spirit and our soul and our heart, when we've really dipped into that inner child and that shadow work and really started to pull out where those wounds came from and started to heal it fully and naturally at the core, rather than just putting medication on top of it, or rather than just saying, oh, that's an addiction, you should just stop. It's not that easy. There's a deep core wound, there's a deep core place that it started within us that is so fucking valid. And when we start to heal the deeper core soul healing of it, suddenly we keep to come through the healing, and then we're like, oh, so where's the addiction gone? And the addiction falls away as a natural consequence, because it's not the addiction that is the issue. It is the underlying layers that have created us to turn to the addiction to satisfy those little bits of ourselves, cover them, hide them, whatever you want to express it as. Like anything, one of my biggest addictions has been in my romantic relationships. The way I found some old messages on my phone from a couple of years ago, on an old phone a while back, and the way I was messaging the person I was seeing at the time, and it was so desperate. It was so desperate. It was so love addict. It was crazy. It wasn't even love addict for that person. I didn't even love that person. It was the addiction to wanting and needing to be approved of and to be loved for who I was. I didn't understand it at the time, but now looking back at those messages, I would just bombard this person, message after message after message after message, being like, why don't you love me? I thought I was good enough, la la la, can't you text back? Am I not important to you? Rah, 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 you're a dick, rah, rah. And then literally it was this toxic, but I wasn't conscious. I didn't actually understand what was going on. I didn't know. In that version of me, I didn't know, and I wasn't aware because I was so unconscious of it. And that's no shame on that part of me or version of me in that stage of my journey. Or if you're there right now and you're going, oh my God, yep, this makes sense. I do that, or I see that in myself, or I have something that I could relate to that. Because we're all in our own journey, and it all comes out divinely when it's meant to. But it's big, baby. We can heal. I want to say, in my perception and my belief system, we can heal through parts of our addictions through digging deeper into the soul heart core. Digging into the deeper feelings and emotions and wounds wounds and shadows and inner child stuff under the surface where it first came from, we can heal through that, and then the addictions fall away by themselves. Not in all cases, but I want to say it definitely won't hurt to step into this space to start healing that. It will still definitely help. Maybe you need other supports put in place as well, and other modalities and different things like that. But there is such core heart soul healing in this work that when we start to look deeper into where the emotions are, where they felt, where the wounds are, where the actual core of it all came from before we created this addiction or took it on from someone else, or these other emotions or experiences in our life that have been traumatic, hard, and challenging for us. And then something else that's coming through right now as well is your story is fucking valid, regardless of how severe or how mild you feel your situation may or may not be to other people. Because we hear this a lot, and I used to do this, is disregard my own journey because I felt like my journey, I was more sheltered and loved, and I had more things in my life, so I would disregard my own journey because I heard of someone else's that I was comparing, that I was like, oh well, I've got it way better off than them. No, that does not disregard my journey or anyone's journey. And I want you to know that regardless of what you've been through, whether to you it is something really extremely severe, or to you feel like you've had quite a lovely upbringing or experiences and nothing's particularly been wrong, there's so much extremes in between the lot, and they are all fucking valid regardless of the experiences that you have been through. They are all so fucking valid because they mean something to you, and they're your story and your journey, and they are fucking important. So I want to remind you that it is not a comparison thing to the person next to you or the other person over here, because that's something I used to do to myself a lot, is compare with people externally to me and be like, well, I always had food on the table, I had a warm house when I was a child, and my whole family was together, and I had all of these lovely things, and then I would disregard how I felt in my emotions, how I perceived the world, how I felt about myself or people and my experiences. Every single person's journey is so fucking unique, and it is so fucking valid. Every single one of you, regardless of the details of what you have been through or not been through, your story is fucking valid. And please don't disregard your story. I just want to really emphasize that today. Please don't disregard your story, because your story and your journey is so fucking important. It is so fucking important. It is like, it is so important, okay? And it is so valid, and you are so valid to feel heard regardless of anything that you have been through or not been through, and regardless of anyone else's stories and journeys that you have heard around the place as well. Your story is really special, and it's really valid, and it is meant to be heard and felt as well. So I love you for your journey and your story. So my Soul Healing Starter Package, it is out at the moment. It is 777 New Zealand dollars. You get a fabulous ebook. It is designed to kickstart you onto your soul healing journey. So perfect for you if you have been on the fence of trying something new, or say you've been trying lots of counselors and lots of different things, and nothing's really worked, or you've been trying to do the things and heal the stuff and it just hasn't been kicking it, and you want to try something new and different, or maybe you already have a soul journey that you've already started on, but this feels like it's calling you to refresh your memory or to shine different light, because everyone does soul healing differently. There's so many different components, and they all come together and intertwine, and they all have elements that complement each other or come to the same kind of healing point, but we all have different ways of doing it. So we go through 7 beautiful sessions together. We do psychic readings and way and how they can support us and guide us, meeting and connecting with your spirit guides that can support you and protect you on your journey. We do inner child, we do shadow work, we do wound healing process. What else do? We do feeling, grieving, and self-care, and into how to get comfortable with our emotions, and how feeling the parts and emotions of us that we often don't want to sit in because they're uncomfortable, how and why that is important to feel through them so that we can strengthen and come through them faster and more fluently, because they're going to come up anyway. So it's $777 New Zealand dollars. You get 7 beautiful sessions, an incredible ebook with a whole lot of juicy stuff. The sessions are live and one-on-one with me, and we walk through your own individual journey. I am open to looking at payment plans depending on the individual, so if that's something that's challenging you, feel free to send me a private message. Otherwise, the link is in the description and the comments. If you just have any questions and you want to know a bit more about it and you're like, well, Maddie, I don't really know what those words or what those sessions really mean, then send me a private message, please, because when I first started on this soul healing journey myself, I literally would hear things like inner child and I was like, well, what does that mean? Shadow, what does that mean? And that's the whole reason I created this course, was to simplify it and break it down into some of the modalities that we use within intuitive healing, and healing at the core from the heart, so that you could get a taste and understanding into simplifying and understanding it in a different way, and then turning it into your own understanding and your own definition of your own soul healing, and then being able to take it away once you finish the package and use it forever lifelong. So you will learn these modalities and we'll go through some meditations and activations and things like that. And then when you come out of the program, you still get to keep all of that. You get to keep your ebook, and so you can go away, you can heal what needs to be healed right now within our sessions together. And then when you finish the package and the program, you have these tools to take them away and then use them forever long on yourself, because you are your own powerful healer. Okay, you have all of it within you. You just need, we just need to have support and be held in safe space to explore these different modalities and these tools, so that we can take it and make our own little kit of healing, and then we take it away and then we can heal ourselves, rather than having to depend and go back to a healer or a doctor or whoever over and over and over and over again. This is why I love this work, because the stuff that we get fucking taught, it teaches us how to heal ourselves forever long, and it is so fucking powerful. There is so much depth to it, there is so much complexity to it, and it is fucking powerful, and it fucking changes your life. So that's a little bit from me today, around I suppose just dipping into how I have noticed lately that addiction is not the issue, it's what's underneath the addiction. Love you all. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful week. We will be doing live psychic readings and intuitive messages live on the Radio Stigma page this Friday at New Zealand time. So come and join us for a beautiful message. Sending you guys so much love, and thank you for joining me today.